Welcome back to Walk with TFB. Tim Bryson here, and as y'all know, I'm a Black millennial who's eager to have unfiltered conversation with authentic people centered on education, sport, and culture. Before we start, I want to read a note from September 23rd, 2015. And the note says this: Mr. Overton, thank you for connecting with me. I wanted to introduce myself and also add that I'll be applying to higher education and student affairs programs to enroll in fall 2016. One of my career interests is in student conduct, specifically Title IX compliance, and I noticed your title at Coastal. Originally from Cincinnati, Ohio, I went to Coastal Carolina my freshman year before transferring to USC. If possible, I would love to find a time to pick your brain about higher education administration in your current role as vice president. I am confident that I will learn a lot from you. Thanks again. Look forward to hearing from you. This was a Facebook message I sent our guests when I was an undergraduate student, eager to break into higher education as a profession. Almost 7 years later, I can honestly say that not only I've learned a lot from this guest, but continue to be inspired each and every day by how he chooses to lead with love, courage, and authenticity. He's a vice president, he's a mentor, sponsor, advisor, alpha man, of course, a dog dad. Without further ado, y'all help me welcome the one and only Mr. Travis Overton.
Man, thank you so much for the opportunity to be with you, Tim. I have to first start off and say you are an incredible young man that impacts so many individuals with what you do. And it has been an honor to be able to interact with you since then and watch your growth and watch the way that you are absolutely going to take over this world in so many ways as you continue to do. So thank you for your authenticity and all that you give, my man.
No, dog, I appreciate it. I receive it. That's my new phrase this year. I receive it. I receive it. I receive it. I'm holding on to it. But Travis, I have prided myself on being creative, right? And being innovative, stepping outside of the box and challenging what seems to be the conventional, right? Status quo. And so this was the first time I switched up the intro for this podcast to introduce our guests. And I did that on purpose, right? Because I was going to end the podcast with that. I was like, no. This is how you and I initially got connected. And I said September 23rd, 2015, which anyone that knows me at this point knows that was 2 days after I got impeached at South Carolina. And from that Facebook message, the last 6.5, almost 7 years have not just written itself, but have really been guided and authored with your help and with your sponsorship. So I want to first make sure that I start the conversation with giving you your flowers for those who tap into this episode. But two, Travis, you are someone, as I think about my own career journey and conversations we both have had and have not had, but have really been watching you since I was a first year at Coastal. You've led the way in a lot of areas that we now in higher ed look to for inspiration. One of which being social media and your social media presence and you being able to leverage digital branding way before it was a topic of conversation, a more common practice here in 2022. But we're going to talk more about your higher education journey. We're going to talk more about your leadership and particularly your number of roles at Coastal. But before we do, I want to first start by asking, what's bringing you Black joy right now?
Man, what's bringing me Black joy is taking a moment and stopping and realizing how important and valuable each moment of my day is. That is truly what's allowing me to pause and recognize that the family that loves me, the friends that are around me, the time that I am blessed to be able to have each day is a true treasure. And particularly as we look amongst this world and this nation, as so many different things are happening, as I have the opportunity to serve as an advisor to a group on campus, African American Initiative for Men. And each and every day I go and I do my work during the day, which I love to be able to do. It doesn't even feel like work. But then I'm able to transition and be in this space with these young men who are on a college campus, on a predominantly white campus, who are working to understand themselves and grow and develop and make a commitment to being better. Man, that is something that I can just consume all day long as I move through. So I think that is probably the best way I can answer that question about what brings me Black joy right now.
You can tell. Anyone that knows you, anyone that follows you, you Facebook famous, but people know that when we see that. But I want to transition to segment one because I think how people see that, why people see that is rooted in your story, right? It's rooted in your identity, your experiences. And so I want to first start by asking you, Travis, like, what's your story?
I think I appreciate that question. I think it's a very unique one, actually. So I was born in Nashville, Tennessee, and being raised by a single mother who was my heart. She passed away in 2013, but was my absolute heart. And in so much that I do today, I made a commitment to her that I would make sure that her legacy is remembered. I was, am, and will be a mama's boy and proud to announce it at any point in time. In no way does that challenge my manhood to say that I am a mama's boy. So therefore, I'm always happy to be able to announce that. And so being raised by a single mother who worked to try to understand what it means to raise two Black boys in the late 80s, early 90s, and then going into when we were going into school was a journey, right? Because she took what she thought and what she knew would be the ways to do it, and she employed that. She remarried in 93, and so that is when my life also changed because we moved from Nashville to Murfreesboro, Tennessee, about 30 minutes up the road, right down the street from Middle Tennessee State University, which is actually where I got my start in higher education, many don't know. And so we moved to Murfreesboro, and that man accepted me in his life as though I was his born child, and still does to this day, and began to show me what manhood and what being a Black man meant. Not necessarily, he did not go to college, so not necessarily from an educational component, but from life, which is the more valuable route that we're able to learn things from. Walking me through the journey of life as he did. But here's the thing, though, Tim. I remember specifically when I was in school, I was that outlier child who liked going to school. Like, right, everybody else would be like, I don't want to go to school. I'd be like, I'm ready to go to school. And at that point, unfortunately, when you're in school and you are that way, people begin to deem you as the nerd or deem you as the teacher's pet or whatever. And even at that point, I was like, I don't care what y'all think. I like going to school. What I did not realize is that what I was so drawn to is the learning experience, the opportunity to learn something new and be engaged with developing, all the way from my kindergarten teacher, Miss Myers. Who in the world remembers their kindergarten teacher's name? But my kindergarten teacher, Mrs. Myers, who challenged us as kindergartners to be able to learn. My first grade teacher, Mrs. Starks, my third grade teacher, Miss Ashley, Miss Shute. She would, if she probably listened to this, she'd probably be like, you better remember my name. But then I remember specifically, I had a fifth grade teacher, Miss Timmons. And Miss Timmons took us outside of the classroom. I remember specifically in fourth grade, we had an experience where we did an angel tree adoption. And she probably was never supposed to do this, and I hope that this doesn't come out to where she. But she took all of us to the mall to go shopping for the angel tree, and I remember specifically that she was bound and determined to be able to get us out and experience that. So not only in the classroom learning, but outside the classroom learning is where I thrive so much, and I enjoy each and every moment of it. So all the way through then, middle school and high school. I was super engaged with the learning experience. And so I think that's what draws me. When you ask the question of what's my story, I think not having an active biological father in my life and then seeing a stepfather come in and be a father who I now call my father, being able to see how much the Black family was part of my world as I focused on growing and developing learning. But then being able to also experience being in the classroom and outside of the classroom and how good learning felt, how good it felt to learn something new and experience something new, I think is a large part of the story that brings me to this point today.
I mean, and I appreciate you sharing at least the initial part of your story. And I want to stay on this topic of your move to Murfreesboro. In the recent podcast I was listening, they were asking about coastal and, keeping Orion, Georgetown, high school students closer to home, et cetera. But you said your story was very similar, right? You wanted to get away. You wanted to go up the street by 90 minutes and experience something different. So can you talk to us more about how you learned that even college was a choice for you, but then also why you chose UT Chat and what your experience at UT Chat was that then influenced your journey today?
Absolutely. So I learned that college was a choice literally by hearing people around me talking about college. There was never an active conversation where someone sat down and said, well, college is here, what you do. It was more so just hearing people have discussions about the college experience. And I remember specifically, Tim, when I was younger in Nashville, I went to Tennessee State's campus and I was there for an event. I have been part of and had been part of a longstanding youth awards program in Nashville, Tennessee. I was a part of this program for about 20 something years, literally from the time that I was about 10 up until I was 30. I was a part of this program. I served as MC for several years of the program and served on the planning committee. And so some of their meetings used to be on the campuses, both at Fisk and Tennessee State. And I remember specifically being at TSU, and I remember walking around and thinking, whoa, this is really cool. So it's like a little city where people are able to go to class and learn like I'm doing right now, either in middle school or high school, but then they're able to live here and be a part of this. And now I couldn't say these words at that point, but now when I reflect back on it, I realized that I was focusing on how that development of a person was taking place all in that one place. And it just intrigued me tremendously. Now, again, if you would have asked me at that point, I couldn't have told you, oh, they were developing themselves all in one place. I just simply, It was just an energy and a vibe in the environment that I later became drawn to say, wait a minute, so this is what after college can be. So yeah, no, okay, that has to be kind of what I do. But to be honest with you, I also watch things like, I grew up on the Cosby Show, and I know, talking. Some people have their thoughts about Bill Cosby, but I can't. That's part of my history. I grew up on the Cosby Show, and I saw the Cosby kids going through college. I saw the success of Cliff Huxtable and Claire Huxtable, and at that point, and I knew that in order to do that, college was a part of it. And so then, at an earlier point, it just kind of became ingrained in my mind. Now, I will also say I sat down with my mama. And so Mama went to college for one semester, and she would tell you, if she was still here, she spent too much time in the student union playing spades. And so therefore, after that one semester, she didn't stay. But she also had a conversation with me, and she said, Travis, you're going to go to college. She said that's your next stop after school. And I was like, oh, okay, well, that makes sense because I'm liking it based on everything I see. And so that story just kind of came together to college being the only option for me. Now, let me be clear. College is not the only option for everybody. So even though I work in higher education and I'm a huge higher education supporter and proponent for higher education in college, I still believe that education after high school can take many forms. And each person has to choose the route that's most beneficial for them.
Hey, man, so while at UT Chat, right, there are a lot of experiences you got involved in, both at the undergraduate and graduate level. And so understanding your mom had went for a semester, obviously played too much spades. You heard about it, you've seen it on TV, right? You've seen it in the media and whatnot. You still had to create your own experience, right? Either by default or those, helping to guide you along the way. And so what are some of the more pivotal moments during your undergraduate and graduate experience that have informed not just your career journey, but also who you are today as well?
Sure. And Tim, you did ask me another question, and I got lost in the story about my mom. I got to stop talking about mom because I can talk about it all day. So therefore, but I chose UT Chattanooga because UT Chattanooga was an hour and a half away from home. So that was enough distance, but not too far. It was still within the state of Tennessee. So therefore, we could still get in-state tuition, which was something I factored in. My number one choice was actually Washington University of St. Louis. That was my number one choice for an institution. But I knew that the only way that I could get there would be if I got a full scholarship. And when we got the letters back, I was placed on the waiting list. So therefore, UT Chattanooga, I got a pretty robust scholarship plan that helped me to go there. And then again, the hour and a half was a good distance. And so therefore that worked. But also they had a business program and a psychology program, which were both of the programs I was intending on going into. And then as a child, I'd gone to Lookout Mountain. So therefore I was like, I've been there before. So, okay, yeah, I can actually do that. But then when I got into college, classes were the same as I described earlier. Like I was in class, I was learning stuff. I remember my psychology professor, who actually recently passed away, Dr. Watson. He was so intriguing. His number one quote, and he stayed to it, was "Things are complex." And everything that he talked about drew back to that. Things are complex. Whether he was talking about people, concepts, situations. And that stuck with me. That was a freshman year class I took, psychology, and that stuck with me huge, to be able to think about the complexity around us. And so as I began to meet and interact with people, Edie Vaughn was assistant director for student activities. I think that was her title at that point. And she was over our Association for Campus Entertainment. And so she drew me into that. Some kind of people that I consider to be mentors of mine in school, my big sister Ashley, my now fraternity brother Willie, my now fraternity brother Chris, they drew me into the gospel choir. And so I came into the gospel choir and joined that. So I began to get involved my freshman year in those involvement opportunities, and that created a way for me to be able to connect at an earlier point outside of the classroom and begin to engage in the full experience. But what are the things that are pivotal? Number one, there was an orientation leader who stopped me when I was going through orientation right before freshman year. His name is Keno Beckton. Keno Beckton is now my fraternity brother, and Keno actually stopped me at orientation. And he sat down with me when we had the residence hall stay that night, and he said to me, "There's something really unique about you. And in coming here, you are really going to thrive." And he asked me about my classes. Had I set out my classes the next day yet? And I said, "No, I haven't yet." And he said, "Well, somebody with your type of skill set and your type of talent can't come in here and not set out your classes. Go get your stuff. We're going to sit down and do it right now." Like, he was that firm with me my freshman year at orientation. And that stuck with me, that he had just spent that much time with me and was able to come to me and say that. So Tim, what that did is that inspired me to think about how words can change individuals. Here's a upperclassman student who's looking at a freshman and sharing that type of language. And so that was a huge moment for me in orientation. Before I even got on campus, this individual was believing in me. And yeah, my mom had believed in me, my family had believed in me, and there have been some others, but here's an upperclassman college student who's looking and saying, "I believe in you, and I believe you're unique and different in what you can do." And that stuck with me. That drove me to be able to say, okay, I got to learn more about this environment and figure out about how I can make this place mine as I'm here.
Well, you made it, George. I'm gonna take it to segment two because it's definitely connected. And you said the upperclassmen saw something in you as a first year. But if you talk to myself, and I'm gonna give you more flowers later, don't you worry. But myself, right, Harry, who's been on the podcast, a lot of other Black men in particular that have gone through Coastal and have been connected with you in any sort of way, you've done the same for them and for us, right, and for me. And so the initial question I wanted to ask you, and I don't want to ask this question because, again, it's a community platform. It's something I'll ask you probably offline as it relates to, like, what did you see in me? But, like, what are you seeing in those that you are uniquely investing in, both with time, energy, money, and otherwise, that allows you to just be open and free and vulnerable to, like, yo, like, I'm here for you, right? Like, yo, I'm here to provide this if you can't provide it for yourself. I'm here to, show you this if you can't see it for yourself, or create that if it doesn't exist. Like, what are you seeing in others? Because it's so easy to do it for everyone, right? But it's not. We don't have the capacity to do that. And so, how do you decide? And, like, what are you seeing that then takes that action step to really investing in a mutually beneficial long-term relationship?
For me, Tim, it is listening to a person and hearing their willingness to listen to something new and different, their desire to want to be a part of changing something or helping move something forward, their desire for personal growth, and the observations that they make in their environment around them and in people around them, and the way in which they use those observations to bring into themselves and say, okay, I can use that to then be able to do this. For example, and I most definitely would not want your podcast to be me talking so amazingly about you, but I told you when you were here, Tim, at the time that I interacted with you, that I've been so impressed by you from day one. And the example that I will give in you is the email that you even wrote, to be able to take time to seek out a way in which to learn more, which showed your desire and willingness to learn, to change, to grow. Here's the thing. If we are interacting with someone who may not already be at that place of where they want to be, but they have a willingness, then that means that with a relationship, partnership, support, and help through a mentorship or a sponsorship, they can move to ascend to that place they want to go. If I or any other administrator look at a person and say, oh, that person can do great things, but that person has no willingness, their own internal desire, then you're expending energy into a situation that may not necessarily be worth your energy or time. And because, to your point, because there are so many people, then the decision to be able to support someone, the decision to be able to guide someone, has to be made with someone who is willing to go there. Now, here's what's important is in any development of a mentorship, sponsorship, it has to be something that both parties want to be able to do, right? Mm-hmm. And that's the last part. For someone to say to another person, there's a student that I've mentored for years now who came up to me his freshman year, and he said to me his freshman year, I know that in order for me to be successful in college, I need to have a mentor that I can work with throughout this time. Would you be willing to serve that? So now, of course, I didn't say yes right off the bat because I didn't know anything about the young man. Yeah. And now, years later, I now look back and see it was one of the most phenomenal young men I've ever met. And he's now a lawyer and doing very, very well. And so as a result, being able to look specifically and say that a person is willing to ask that question or a person is willing to accept that interaction, that's key. That's a critical component because that means the person is willing to change. So those are some of the key things that I look at when making a decision with a student to be able to make that connection.
Yeah, I mean, you're making it with students, individual students. You're also making it with student organizations. We're going to talk about AIM in a second as well. But I want to stick on this willingness piece in particular because even you in particular identifying a willingness, as you continue to progress, ascend throughout your career, your decision to invest in someone else, especially a younger junior scholar, junior practitioner, it's still a risk. Like there's still some risk, right, involved with that process that you have to negotiate within yourself. And so if someone like myself wants to be a senior leader, whether it's in higher ed or not, but also those who are on this podcast listening and or watching that are deciding, do I take this risk, right? When I see, how do you even negotiate what you want to put your name behind? Because reputation can end, like this.
You're exactly right. And I think there are a couple of things with that. And you are speaking to a person who has also gone through a lawsuit where individuals filed false statements. And luckily the federal courts determined by looking at the lawsuit that they were false.
Yeah, good.
And so that is helpful, but it is a risk. However, for me, it is the risk I have decided to take by going into this profession and doing the work that I do. If I don't accept that risk in being in education or particularly working in higher education, then for me, I have to take a step back and say, what am I here for? Am I here just for the paycheck? Am I here just to be a part of the environment? Because if I'm not willing to take that risk to sow into other individuals and be able to help them grow, then that defeats the purpose of education for me. And again, these are my personal perspectives on this. And so therefore, each person is coming into this environment. And one of the things you heard me talk about when I think about my own story are the people, right? Mm-hmm. Those teachers, my family, my father, those individuals who have played a role are the reason that I have been able to believe in myself this way and been able to progress this way. So therefore, I have no choice but to be able to continue to give that to the environment around me, because I would not have been able to move in the direction that I have without that. Being a person who's under 40 years old and a vice president and chief of staff at a university, there's no way I would have been able to pursue that if someone had not believed in me. And if someone had not sat down and said, I want to be able to push you to be able to go. If Keno Becton had not had that conversation that freshman year. So I believe it's our responsibility to, and yes, it's a risk, and everything in life is going to have a risk. And it's just trying to be able to balance that risk. Now, don't be foolish, right? That we got to make sure that we're doing it right. And let's admit, and this is true in our field, there are some individuals who choose to do things for the wrong reasons. And that can put a bad look on everything. But to the point of reputation, here is what I lean on in regards to reputation is I am willing to give to that individual. I'm willing to support that individual. I am willing to speak on what I know of that individual. Here's one thing that's true, though. I can never speak on exactly what that individual will do. And that's one thing I'm very clear on. If someone calls me, I can tell you everything I know, what I believe they can do. But let me be clear to tell you that I can't tell you exactly what this person will do. I can just speak on my experiences with that person that tell me why they would do well in this particular area or doing this particular thing or moving forward in this particular area.
That's excellent. Yeah, I like that risk part. Right. I think there's a lot more conversation about stocks, right, and investing in crypto and everything else. When you invest, well, people invest a lot of money in things that are not seeable or cannot be seen.
Right.
We got to take that same risk on people, on humans.
Right.
We got to do it, especially when you have the capital to leverage and amplify and sponsor and elevate people, especially our people. And one of the ways in which you continue to elevate our people is being the advisor for the African American Initiative for Men, AIM, at Coastal Carolina University, located in Conway, South Carolina, home of the Chanticleers. And so, can you talk to us more about what is AIM, right? What is AIM? It's a conversation right now in Maryland I'm having with myself. Like, how can I better support our Black athletes? Is it an organization, right? Like, do we have to institutionalize this work? And if so, what should it look like in collaboration with the institution? But I'm just curious to learn more from your perspective. Like, what is the AIM? Why is it? I mean, of course, you're taking risk in supporting these men, these are Black men. But why has it been important for you to still keep as you continue to ascend at Coastal in your professional roles?
Absolutely. So AIM is, as you mentioned, African American Initiative for Men at Coastal Carolina, and it is an institutional initiative. It's actually housed in the Intercultural and Inclusion Student Services Office at Coastal. And we work directly with that office to provide a space for African American men at Coastal Carolina to feel as though that they belong at Coastal, that this is their home. So back in 2009, working with the longstanding director for 38 years, Ms. Pat Singleton Young served as the director of what was then Multicultural Student Services. And working with her, we identified that our Black men, our African American men at Coastal, felt as though that Coastal was not their home. And so we actually went on a journey where I did about 50 one-on-one interviews with Black or African American men at Coastal Carolina. And in those interviews, it rose to the top that those students did not feel as though Coastal was their home. And we used the information from those interviews to then drive the development of this initiative. So we sat down with a group of students who were originally at that point the AIM Fellows. That leadership group has now transitioned to the AIM Pioneers. And we focus on developing a space that these students can come to regularly or be a part of with activities to where they can be themselves, but also allow themselves to be challenged about what it means to be an African American man. And so therefore, our curriculum and our schedule that we develop for the year creates what we call general meetings, which are actually in the format of a barbershop talk. We use barbershop because most Black men have experienced time in the barbershop where you just talk about a little bit of everything. And so therefore we use that format. It's an open floor conversation format that we go to every 2 weeks. But then we did game night this past week. We will have a summit in April where we will be looking for speakers to come and facilitate. So I hope there'll be some individuals willing to come and facilitate at Coastal Carolina. Tim, I hope you'll be willing to come and facilitate. It's April 8th and 9th.
I'm pulling up.
So it's April 8th and 9th, where we will have a summit as part of the Intercultural and Inclusion Student Services Summit. We will have an AIM lead track as part of that. And so being a part and being connected with these young men each year helps to remind me, number one, who I was at a predominantly white institution when I stepped on the campus of the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga. It helps to remind me what I felt walking around the campus on a regular basis, being in that predominantly white space. And the struggles that I had identifying with the culture that I had known growing up, and now being in this higher educational structure, which is different than what I've known. The challenges are different. The expectations are different. The way you manage your things are different. And being able to adjust to that. But what we're working to do is still create a space that after you've gone through that all day, you've got this opportunity to come into this space as a place of comfort, to be able to refuel, recharge, to go back into that space on a regular basis. And so that's our goal. There are 4 advisors. You mentioned Harry Titus. He is one of our advisors for the initiative. And so we're very fortunate to see that group continue to grow. And it was an agreement with the past president of Coastal Carolina and myself that as I moved into this vice president and chief of staff role, that I still have the opportunity to serve as an advisor for AIM. And he agreed. Our new president, who was phenomenal, has also agreed and supported that. And so it's been a key part. You talk about Black joy, man, walking in that space, the energy from that space, the way those young men connect and feel recharged and revived from that space, there's nothing like it. There's literally nothing like it.
You got me hyped, yo. So it launched 2009? That was the first year?
2009 was the first formalized year. Miss Pat had actually done some activities with a group prior to that. They brought in some speakers to campus. Prior to that, they brought in Dr. Jamie Washington, and they brought in a couple of other speakers prior to that. But we formalized the initiative in what its current format is in 2009.
So I guess over the last, 12, 13 years, my personal question, how have Black college athletes at Coastal been part of that or opted into it?
That's a great question. It's been a challenge. It has been a challenge because, number one, scheduling. AIM has met for this entire time at 5:30 on Wednesdays. And for many of our athletes, 5:30 in the middle of the week is a difficult time for them. But then also it is the challenge of our Black men that are part of our athletic teams already feel as though they have the connection within the team. And so oftentimes they feel as though there's not necessarily a need to have an additional connector. However, in the time that we have been able to see some Black men who are part of our athletic teams come into the space, they have absolutely loved it when they've come into the space, and it's challenged them outside of what they thought the space was. They get there and they're like, oh, I didn't realize it was this. Including one former football player that I was just on the phone with last week, who came into the space his senior year. And he said to me, he was like, I really wish I would have known about this space the entire time. And so we're still working on trying to bridge that connector with athletes, trying to overcome the time piece, because I do recognize that's a challenge that exists.
That's real. Shout out to the Track Boys, Fall 11, Spring 12. Hope we didn't cause you too many issues. Formerly Dean Overton.
No, not anything that I can talk about on your podcast. So.
I hope we didn't cause you no issues, Joe. But in addition, alongside your role as the advisor, you are the vice president for executive initiatives and chief of staff at Coastal. And so for those, particularly myself, I'm thinking about positions in higher ed, I may have here like a vice president of student affairs, maybe obviously president, maybe provost or dean. Like, what does it mean to be a chief of staff and vice president of executive initiatives at the university?
Yeah. So the vice president part, administratively, I provide executive level leadership for several departments. I provide leadership for university marketing communication right now. Also for Shop 411, which is our premier information service at Coastal, works to answer any questions about Coastal Carolina University. It's a fantastic program. And then also scheduling and event services, I provide leadership for that area on our campus. And then also ITS, information technology services. So that is a portfolio, that is a vice presidential portfolio where each of those either have directors or associate vice presidents that provide leadership for those areas. And I provide the executive level supervision for the departments, for those units or divisions. But on the chief of staff side, the chief of staff is really where I am day to day, operationally working on projects, working on things myself. So whereas in my vice presidential role, I'm supervising what those colleagues are doing within their departments. As chief of staff, I work within the office of the president, and I help manage all things operational for the office of the president, which turns into many things operational for the entire campus. What I like to call chief of staff, I just told a colleague not too long ago, is chief of staff, I have learned, is like the glue of the campus. And here's what I mean by that. If there is something coming up and no one knows where it falls, it doesn't fall cleanly in a place at the university, oftentimes the chief of staff is the one who takes that and either works it towards completion or works it to a point to collaborate with a colleague on campus to get it to them. Oftentimes, I am called upon to speak on behalf of the Office of the President, whether about the university or whether something internally to the university as well. The second in command at the university, at our university, is the provost. He is the senior executive vice president for academic affairs and provost. So he is second in command at the university. So therefore, if there are university level issues, those would fall to him if the president was unavailable. But within the office of the president, I serve to provide support for things happening across the campus and help to manage the operations within the office of the president.
This is excellent. This is excellent. And I'm glad we have you on, because I told you before that I want our conversation, at least the time we have left, because I know people are going to want to hear more from you after this, to be focused on university level decision making, right, in conversations. And as you were talking earlier, Travis, I was like, yo, like, don't really want to bring this up, but I'm like, it's the Walk with TFB podcast, and we have to. And so the first question, looking at your face right now, but the first question I want to ask is that, as someone who came from out of state, went 10 and a half hours away from home to come to Coastal, and since leaving Coastal, transferring out of Coastal, a lot of conversation about like what Coastal is and isn't, right? You hear like it's not college, it's Coastal. We're going to talk about that in a second. We hear like from an athletic standpoint, recruiting, right? Ball at the beach, right? Blowing up this like, tropical, come, kick it, relax. But it's still it's an institution of higher learning, right? And so how do you balance like the recruitment, the aesthetic? I mean, it's a beautiful campus for those who have not been, but the aesthetic of the campus to get students here, but then also keep them here, because retention has been I'm sure, a point of conversation in the last decade, but then also ensure that the education is what come first at a school that's 8 miles from Myrtle Beach.
Right. For Coastal has gone through a lot of different identity journeys relative to the beach. There were times at Coastal where we were completely using a method of not even talking about the beach. Now, let's start out first, and this is important, and I say this everywhere I am. Coastal Carolina is not located in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Coastal Carolina is located in Conway, South Carolina. Conway is a city outside of Myrtle Beach, but that is the home seat of Coastal Carolina. Now, with that being said, to your point, 8 to 10 miles from the campus is the ocean. It is Myrtle Beach, one of the top vacation destinations. And so therefore, one of the things that we work to do, Tim, is to realize what role that is as part of our personality. We can't ignore it, right? We can't pretend as though that we're not located near Myrtle Beach, because we are. Which also means that, when my family, let's use my family, for example, when they come down, they're not coming to visit and say, Travis, let's go over to campus, right? They're saying, where can I go in Myrtle Beach? And, by the way, can we tour campus while we're here, right? And so therefore, I think it's important for us, and particularly with my role of supervising university marketing communication, I've been able to dive into this even more. What we work to do is to acknowledge, most definitely, our proximity to the ocean, our proximity to Myrtle Beach, and the role in which that can play in a person's experience here, but challenge a person, particularly a student, challenging a student to think very intensely about why they are coming here. You can choose to have one of the most expensive vacations that you ever wanted to, and that is by choosing to go here and then spending all your time in Myrtle Beach. That's an incredibly expensive vacation. And so one of the things that we challenge individuals to do is to think intentionally about how you can make a decision to come here because higher education is what you're pursuing. Make a decision to come here because you are focusing on development of yourself. Make a decision to come here because of the placement rates that we have with businesses afterwards, or the Wall Fellows program that works to do internships at high level places based on where we are. Make a decision to come here because of those things, but then also making sure, yes, to enjoy the location while you're here, and
Sure.
making sure that part of your experience is going out with friends to somewhere in Myrtle Beach. We don't need to try to restrict you from that, but that can't be the primary focus. And so as a result, we started, Tim, putting questions on our application. We started asking questions of students when they get here. We start looking strategically at our marketing to make sure that even though we might be saying ball at the beach with athletics, or even though we may be talking about, if you come here for summer school, we're near a beach, or whatever it might be, we are still putting first the academic experience and challenging individuals to make sure. And that is that's a very delicate balance to strike, that we have to make sure we do as part of recruiting individuals, faculty, staff, and students to this environment as well.
Well said. Well said. And so thinking about the identity of Coastal, I think I think you probably were at orientation. Serves me correctly. 1954 is when we split. I say we. Y'all split from South Carolina?
93.
93, officially.
Yep. 1954 is when the campus actually started.
Wow.
And in 1954, but then from 1954 up until 1993, we were affiliated with another college. A majority of that we were affiliated with USC. A short time period there, we were affiliated with College of Charleston.
Yep.
But 1993 is when we became independent and became Coastal Carolina University.
Wow, look at that historical knowledge from Mr. Overton. But so identity from a state standpoint, right? You got South Carolina, you got the other school up north, you got CFC. Like, what conversations are y'all having, right? Are y'all thinking about to position Coastal from an identity standpoint, but also, value add perspective within a larger, state system that has multiple schools that students can choose from, at least those that are particularly in state?
Sure. So I think a couple of things are true. Each of those experiences, first of all, each of the experiences of the South Carolina school is going to give you a phenomenal college experience. Whether you choose USC, whether you choose Clemson, whether you choose Winthrop, whether you choose the Citadel to have a military experience, or whether you come here to Coastal Carolina. What's unique, though, is being able for the person to think about what they want out of the experience. So number one, what is your academic desire? If your academic desire exists at the school, then that's your first point. If you are desirous of pursuing a degree in marine science, you're probably not going to be going to USC. You probably are going to be coming to Coastal. So that's number one. Number two is the type of experience that you want. So if you want a larger school experience, if you want a mid-sized school experience, if you want a smaller school experience, then that's where we're going to work to challenge an individual. For me personally, when I chose University of Tennessee at Chattanooga, and what we find many people that choose Coastal are looking for, is they're looking for a smaller family type feel. They're looking for a situation that when they walk into the faculty member's classroom, that there's a high chance that faculty member is going to learn their name and know their name, and they will build that connection. They are looking for the outside hands-on experience with a faculty member where they can do direct research or direct experiential learning. And so that is what Coastal is going to be able to offer. Not at all saying that the other schools are not offering that, but when you look at USC, when you look at Clemson, and you look at Coastal, Coastal is going to give you a smaller experience in regards to where you are. The other thing is that here's what's key. Some individuals who are looking to go to college are looking for a experience that is already very, very firm in its tradition as far as their experience. And then some are looking at being at the beginning of the tradition. So you just talked about us separating in 1993. So that means what I tell people is we're a campus that's really about 29 years old, right? When you think about the actual personality and identity. Now we're older than that as a campus, but we separated in 93 as Coastal Carolina University, which means that individuals choosing to come to Coastal are still at the part of our university trajectory where they are helping to build and develop the traditions. And so back to your earlier question about administrative decision-making, that's exactly what we are working through a lot as administration is, as a university, at that 29-year trajectory, recognizing, yes, that there were years before that. So not at all dismissing those years before that, but at the 29 years since separation from USC, what does that mean for a long-term decision that we're making right now? And so therefore, students coming to Coastal are able to be part of those conversations. Whether you're a student leader, whether you're a student that's just responding to surveys, whether you're a student that's giving information to the president or to your faculty member, you're able to be a part of that earlier conversation of setting traditions and kind of building this campus for that next place of where it's going.
Okay. And so that makes a lot more sense, especially in context, right? And setting the scene. But even I started there fall 11. So what, that's 18 years into y'all's independent status as a university. We were still doing, I'm a shine for life. Y'all were still doing,
right.
I am. I'm sorry. Not really sorry. But y'all were still doing innovative stuff in fall 11. The other schools were not doing at that time, right? But whether it was people didn't know about it, care to acknowledge what y'all were doing. And I'm particularly thinking about like your Twitter presence, number one. But then even wasn't like CCU food, man, wasn't even like the golf cart, like driving around. You know what I mean? Like, that's right. Innovative thing. And so that, as I think about, and as you just talk about, being part of a 29-year, these current, history, and it's still building, establishing traditions that are last way beyond our time together. What are Coastal Carolina's university priorities right now? And how do you manage those priorities alongside student voice or alongside student demands that may be competing with where y'all want to go as a university?
Sure. I'm sure he would be fine with it, but our new president is President Michael Benson. He comes to us after having served as president at 3 other institutions before coming to us. Most recently was at Eastern Kentucky University. And one of the things he talks about, which I appreciate greatly, is he talks about the 3 R's, which are reach, rigor, and reputation. And so the focus under this president that we are working on specifically is the reach. So thinking specifically about how our campus works to present itself so that individuals know who we are, recognize what we have to offer, going right back to the question that you have presented forth. The rigor, and he's not just talking about how hard is the classroom. That is part of it. We want to make sure that critical thinking is taught, critical thinking is developed so that individuals going through the classroom are able to kind of grow from that, but also the rigor of the experience. So how does a person grow throughout their time at Coastal? In what way does that individual become a global citizen through their experiences at Coastal? And then reputation, of course, is going to tie to those things, right? So the reputation is going to be how far have we reached and how rigorous is the environment for a person's growth to then be able to create for people when they think about Coastal specifically, what are they thinking about as far as this institution is concerned? And so we're looking at that in a lot of different ways. We're looking at that as far as our academic programs, bringing new academic programs to campus that are meeting the need of what's out there as far as individuals in the career field right now. But then also working to make sure that the student experience, both on the field as far as our competitive sports. I mean, our sports have done a tremendous amount of work over the last few years, including our football team, who just won the Cure Bowl and had a fantastic season the last 2 seasons and is continuously working towards that. Of course, we cannot forget baseball and their amazing accomplishments in 2016, winning the national championship and their regional and super regional appearances even prior to that. And so looking across both athletically and non-athletically to our student experiences of Relay for Life on our campus that has raised over $1 million over the span of 10 years on our campus, and looking at the Wall Fellows who are outside the classroom working to be positioned at places like Rolls-Royce and BMW for their internships. And so looking at building those things out so that the student experience is one that creates that reputation that when people are thinking about Coastal, they're saying, I want to choose there because I know this is the type of experience that I'll get.
I love this. I love to be connected with you, Travis. There's some people you just listen to and they talk like Obama, Barack Obama, you, my guy, Ilya. You can just sit and listen for hours, yo.
Let me tell you, you just put me in a category that I would never accept myself. Woo, boy.
I can sit and listen to for hours. I'm taking notes over here. Like, okay, like reach. This is some good stuff.
That is the
It's a must.
president.
I,
I
I,
cannot.
I,
I give him his full credit for bringing that forth, and that'll be leading us through our strategic planning process as well.
no, most definitely. I'll be sure to quote President Benson as well when I choose to use that. But I'll be remiss if I didn't ask this follow-up question, which is, what is the future? What's the future look like? How are you continuing to shape the future now? And not just, again, student recruitment and identity building, as we talked about before, but also supporting and recruiting talented staff and faculty from across the world.
Tim, that's a great question. I think anybody who's watching right now is seeing what they're deeming the great resignation in higher education, and the impact that is having specifically on the experience within higher education. And so as far as the future, there are a number of things that we have to be thinking about. We know that there is an enrollment dip that we are anticipating based on a number of eligible students to go to college as years move on. So we have to be thinking specifically about sustainable models as an institution. We are an enrollment-driven institution in regards to our budget. We are funded by the state at about 8%. The rest is pretty much tuition. We do have some other numbers that calculate in there, but so we have to think very strategically as a university about how to be sustainable in what we're doing and making absolutely sure that we are able to move forward as a university in the midst of that enrollment dip. But then also thinking specifically about what type of environment are we creating for our faculty and our staff to ensure that those individuals can have a healthy, strong, supportive experience, so that as we overcome this pandemic and begin to think more about COVID-19 being more endemic to our population as opposed to a pandemic, that we are able to support those colleagues in their desire to stay at Coastal. So we are embarking on the strategic plan. We actually will be working with a firm that will be coming into the campus. That is one of my roles as chief of staff, is to work directly with that firm and be able to guide us through the development of our new strategic plan. Our strategic plan ran out in 2021, so we'll be doing another one that starts us. And so we'll be evaluating all of these things and specifically how to do it on our campus in order to make sure that we're moving forward.
Real quick on a strat plan piece. I want to go dive deeper, but we don't have the time to do so right now. How are students chosen, both undergrad and grad, to be part of that decision-making process?
Usually, I've looked at several strategic plan committees, and oftentimes student government is who they will utilize because they use that as the voice of the students through election. However, I believe for us, we're going to expand it. And when we look at particular students being involved in the overall process for the strategic plan, we are going to work with some of our established student groups so that there are working groups of students in leadership roles of various organizations, as well as an open call for students who want to be able to participate, to be able to give feedback during the process. They may not necessarily be on the committee as a whole, but to be able to give feedback during the process as we're identifying who we are as an institution and where those priorities sit.
So it makes sense to me. And the last question before segment 3, what have you learned about yourself, or what are you continuing to learn and maybe unlearn about yourself and or higher ed, over your last, 14, 15 years in this industry?
Well, it's interesting, Tim. My actual journey in higher ed, weirdly enough, started in 2001. I worked for an apartment management company where that was seated on the campus of the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga. And so I worked in that capacity and worked very, very closely with the administration in that role with that apartment management company. So I actually technically consider my journey to now be about 20 years, working with that. And so that started early. That actually started my sophomore year in college. And I was sitting at the table with directors and vice presidents at University of Tennessee at Chattanooga in that capacity. And so it was an incredible opportunity for me to be able to, at an early point, see how a university functions and operates. I was the leasing manager for that property, so I was able to work specifically with them as we're recruiting. So, to the question of over that time, what have I learned? One of the things I've most definitely learned is burnout is real. It is absolutely real. And if we do not figure out how to manage it, I did not even fully realize how tired I was as chief of staff navigating everything that's just occurred. And don't get me wrong, we as a university went through a process where we actually eliminated roles on our campus. And so the experience that I had can't even compare to individuals who had to receive the phone call that their jobs were being eliminated. Unfortunately, there were several of us that had to manage many of those calls. And so that was also taxing, again, not nearly as taxing as receiving the phone call. And so realizing how much it takes out of you, to your earlier question of choosing to invest in someone, realizing how much that can take out of you, to choose to invest in someone, and whether or not they are choosing to do the things they say they're going to do, or the help that they decide they need from you, can be very taxing. And so one of the big things I've learned and am continuing to learn is taking time for myself. But the other thing that I'm learning professionally is how important this educational experience can be for someone who is actually wanting to take advantage of it and wanting to grow. I have seen, including yourself, I have seen some remarkable people walk through the walls of higher education who have now made the decision based on their journeys, both in higher education and before, to change the world with things that they're doing. So it reminds me that in the 20 years that I've been doing this work, specifically, that we are building the next leaders, and we cannot forget that. That is core at what we're working to do, which is why we have to take the risk to invest. It's why we have to make sure the decisions we're making are for the best of the institution. We have to think about those things because of who we are responsible for building.
Amen, Travis. Amen, Travis. And so segment 3, you mentioned, creating time, finding time to rest. But how can I personally, but also our podcast community, best support you as a person, as a human, but also the great university, the great college, Coastal Carolina University?
Well, first of all, I want to, Tim, I've already said you are one of the most phenomenal young men I've ever met. I watched you both in a professional conference experience as well as an internship experience. And I've continued to monitor and watch you since then, and your drive, your motivation, and your passion. And through that, explaining to people that Coastal was a stop in your journey in more than one way, both educationally and as an internship opportunity, really helps to bolster the name of Coastal Carolina because of who you are and because of where you've made your commitment. And so as a result, I think one of the ways in which this podcast is able to support Coastal is by continuing to be the person that you are, doing the work that you do, making the commitment that you make, and going out and associating that with Coastal. It goes back to those 3 R's. When I think about the reputation, someone walks away from their experience with you and they may think differently. They may first have thought Coastal is that place by Myrtle Beach, right? So it's a party environment. And now they're thinking, whoa, he was at Coastal for a while. Yes, he transferred, but apparently he liked it because he went back for an internship. So that changes the reputation of Coastal in someone's mind who may already see it in a different light. And so that in this podcast has an amazing opportunity to impact our campus and who we are. But I think also telling the story of education and how important education is. As Coastal, as a university, we are committed to helping individuals grow in higher education. So if you're telling the story through this podcast, if you're talking specifically about magnifying the life of Black voices, which is something we care tremendously about at Coastal, then you are helping Coastal and every other institution because you're bringing it back to what the college experience and growth and development in that way can be about.
I love that. And it's funny, I was just in Dallas for a couple of days. Great time. Found time to rest, to your point. And I was telling my friend, I wish I could rep Coastal more. And I said, you know what, I can. And to your point, and looking back, Coastal was not, it was definitely, it was 2 stops. But both stops were arguably, and I would argue this with anyone, were the most important stops on my higher education journey. Based on what I've seen, based on what I heard, based on what I experienced, and continue to then reflect, advocate for not just in, public conversations like this, but also helping people understand, what the hell a Chanticleer is. It's history, right? those are also moments where I hope I can add and extend the reach, but also elevate the reputation and rigor of Coastal Carolina University.
Well, I appreciate that. And Tim, I will tell you, looking at all that you have accomplished and will accomplish, anytime you tell someone your association with Coastal Carolina, it will lift the reputation. You are doing amazing things, young man, and I am so incredibly proud and impressed by you continuously on a regular basis.
I appreciate you, homie. But before we bounce, I gotta ask these questions because the people want to know. First and foremost, Travis, what's your favorite sports memory? The one you witnessed?
My favorite sports memory. Sports memory. My favorite sports memory would be on TV when the Chanticleers clinched the World Series. I am actually not a huge sports fan, and that goes back to my brother. He's probably watching this. When it goes back to him watching sports the whole time I was growing up, and so therefore I developed an aversion to sports. However, I was going to watch the Chanticleers when they were in the World Championship, and that to me was tremendous because I was able to see that and witness it while I work as an administrator at that institution, which is a very uncommon opportunity for administrators.
Very true. Very, very true. And this is going to be an interesting question. Your top 5 musical artists of all time.
Oh my gosh.
No order. 5. No order. Just top 5.
Please don't give me an order. Kim, and that is not Little Kim, that is K-E-M, Kim. Okay. K-E-M. Let's make sure we get that right. Anita Baker, Layla Hathaway, Justin Timberlake. Yeah, Justin Timberlake. And then number 5 would be, and this is largely because I grew up on this, Luther Vandross. That's because I grew up on it and my mom played it all the time. So I have no choice but to have it embedded in who I am. That and the Baker. That's where those came from. So
you are definitely, you're also my dog.
I am. I am.
You're also, if you could go to brunch, bottomless or otherwise, you plus 5 people, who are you bringing? They could be for any point in time in your life.
Oh man, my mama, me and 5 people, and my daddy because he's from the country and he's country, so he'll be the life of the brunch. It has to be people that I knew or know.
No, anyone.
Got
Those you met and have not met.
Got it. And then we're gonna go up and we're gonna call Barack, because I need to see if Barack could be there. And then I'm going to go over and grab. Ooh, boy, this is rough. Only 5, man. All right, so we're gonna do Mama, Murray. We're gonna do Barack, and then, man, this is rough. Well, you can't invite Barack and not invite Michelle. So we're going to go ahead and do Barack and Michelle. And then that 5th, I think would actually have to be, man, somebody that I just enjoy, can listen to all day. Who would it be? Well, all the people in my family, they're going to be like, for real, you didn't choose me? It's only 5. It's only 5, y'all. I'm sorry. It's only 5. So the 5th would be Martin Luther King.
That'd be good. That'd be an excellent brunch. Okay, well, last question for you, Travis. Who do you want to see and or hear from on this podcast?
I think being able to possibly see or hear from, most recently, Tim, I had the opportunity to sit and talk briefly with Freeman Hrabowski, who is the current president of University of Maryland, Baltimore County, UMBC. He's retiring next year. He came and spoke at Coastal Carolina University. But I sat with him and I had the opportunity to bring him from the hotel back to campus. And I left this conversation with Dr. Hrabowski, just completely enamored by the things he could challenge me to think about just in that short conversation. of a drive there. I mean, just listening to him, I literally walked out. I was energized. I was ready. I was thinking about things. I'm still thinking about things from the conversation. He's been a college president, I believe, since '92, I believe, and just done some fantastic things there at the university. Actually wrote the book, The Empowered University. We read his book here as a university. And so I think he would bring such an amazing perspective to the podcast, particularly when you think about Black voices in higher education or just education in general and his time frame, but then also looking at what he's done to increase the enrollment of minority students at UMBC while he's been there has been tremendous. So he could speak so much about that in the education world.
I love it. I might need your help, but I love it. We're going to get on President Freeman. Okay, Travis. Anything else before we jump off? Any last words? Give us a word, my brother. Give us a word. Inspire the folks.
You know what, Tim? It's interesting. My mentor, Jeffrey T. Bergen Jr., who works in higher education, has worked in higher education for several years. I heard him say something when I was working with him at University of Tennessee at Chattanooga, and it has stuck with me, and I still use it today when I talk to people, and that is good, better, best. Never let it rest until your good is your better and your better is your best. And in hearing him say that, it made me think so much about how each opportunity that we take, that we want to try to do our absolute best. And Tim, dude, man, you are continuing to do your best. You are continuing to strive for that top level at what you do. And you have every ounce of potential that a person can ever have to be able to do that. I have sat with you, I've talked to you, I've listened to you, I've watched you, and you have all of that and more to be able to do that. So I close in just saying thank you for what you're doing for so many and bringing this and being who you are and then not giving up and working towards every dream that you are working to accomplish. And never stopping on that. I just say thank you for that because you are inspiring folks on a regular basis. And I'm so incredibly impressed by you.
I'm going to cry at some point during this season, Travis. And it might be right after I hit the leave button on the Zoom. But I want to, again, I receive it. I accept it. I embrace it. I love it. I love you for that. And yeah, I only have 2 words for you as we close. Just say thank you. Wouldn't be here without you, dog. Like genuinely would not be here without you. You're someone who has always not just created opportunities, but you never had me choose. You always said that you could do both. Whether I was with the internship, whether I was a continued conversations after the internship and who I got to connect with, and so on and so forth. So just thank you. Thank you.
You're so very welcome, man. I look forward to staying in touch and watching all the things you're going to accomplish.
Oh, yeah. Got some things, Travi. I got some things we're going to talk about soon with everybody else, man. Make sure y'all tune in to next week's. Thank y'all for tuning into this week's episode. Make sure y'all tune in to next week's episode as we continue to walk through this season as we close out season 4 of the Walk with TV podcast. Look forward to having more unfiltered conversation with authentic millennial leaders in our education, sport, and culture. But as always, until then, welcome